Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad that you're joining us again. It's been a little while in between programs, but we're getting back on a regular basis, so we're glad you're joining us. We're glad for people like you that are interested in what's happening in your cities. If you haven't watched us before, each week we'll have somebody on from one of the 9 cities in CCX's viewing area to update us on what's happening in that city and what's going to be happening in the future. And then from time to time, we bring in other people that interact with all of our cities as a whole, which we're doing tonight. We're very happy to have Representative Mike Freiberg with us from District 45B. So it's been a little while since we've had you on. So we're glad to have you back, and it's been a different year in many senses. The legislature being one of the many ones, and we'll look and see what's happened there and what's going to come up in the future of the 2020 legislative session. But the lesson, I thought we should just mention, because I'm not sure people are aware of it, that a legislative session lasts for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So 2020 is the second part, and it was a different kind of year in terms of how they approached it, because usually the second year deals with the budget, right? Or the bonding.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sure. No, go ahead. Talk about it.
Traditionally, the first year, which is the odd year of the biennium, that's
right.
The word for the 2-year term. The first year we focus on the budget, and we set a 2-year budget for the state. And then normally the goal for the second year, the even year of the biennium, is to pass a bonding bill to invest in infrastructure all over the state. The budget takes a long time, so the first year of the biennium is usually longer. The bonding year is shorter. There are some other issues that come up both years. Certainly those aren't the only things we consider. But at least during the regular session, traditionally the first year is the budget year, second year is the bonding year. And this year we've also had several special sessions, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
So it's been a very different year as they approach things. Everybody has to adjust to this pandemic that we're in, because there's no way to get around it. So the legislature has done a lot of adjusting and trying to deal with it. Sometimes to people's dismay, sometimes to their happiness, right?
Yeah.
Now, the last legislative session worked on many bills. What were some of the background of why you think there so many of them didn't make it to completion? And maybe you can mention the ones that did?
Sure. There were some highlights, I'd say, of things we passed, some good things that we passed. I mean, we did pass a budget during the 2019 session, so we passed a balanced budget that made some pretty important investments. In the MFIP program, we increased it for the first time in a number of years just to help needy families. There have been some victories on policy issues as well. We passed an elder abuse prevention package. A big thing was the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act. We've kept hearing about people who are rationing their insulin. And so we were able to pass kind of the first step to helping there be a supply that people with diabetes can get when they're having a financial crisis or so forth. So those were some of the highlights of things we passed this year. Just this the 2020 session in particular was unlike any certainly I've ever seen. The pandemic kind of struck in the middle of March, and we were in the middle of our session then, and everything kind of ground to a screeching halt for a couple weeks when that happened. And then when we came back, it was in kind of a remote setting, so we were able to have, partially remote floor sessions where some members would call in, some members were on the floor. We had remote committee hearings by Zoom where everyone called in. But still, it just adapting to that took some time, and a lot of things that we had been hoping to focus on kind of had to just fell off the table.
Well, and the flow of information back and forth between legislators would certainly be affected by that too, because that's sort of part of the process is the information you share with each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, you spend a lot of time in other members' offices and just talking to other members on the floor or in committee or before or after committee. So a lot of work does get done that way. And certainly meeting with them by Zoom is, it's good, but you do lose something, I think, in terms of personal communication when everything's being done electronically.
Yeah, learned lots of different social media ways of getting in touch with people, or hopefully duplicating as best you can the back and forth that legislators need.
Yeah.
And then several major bills kind of stalled or wouldn't pass because of the time involved. What bills were stalled or that didn't get to completion that you've been working on off and on ever since?
Well, probably the big one, the big one is the bonding bill. Right. And I don't know if we'll talk more about that later, but I'll just say a little bit about it now. Most bills require a simple majority of legislators that are there to pass, but the bonding bill requires a supermajority. And the way things work right now, if in the House, if every Democrat voted for a bonding bill, you still need 6 Republican legislators to get to the supermajority of 81 out of 134 legislators. So that presents some challenges. I mean, we did put together a package that had investments all over the state, I would say, but still the House GOP did not. The few times during the regular and special session that we voted for it, they did not put up any votes, so we weren't able to get a majority, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that the usual give and take wasn't in evidence, right?
Yeah, no, and as we've had these special sessions on a monthly basis, I mean, there's been discussion that, there have been negotiations ongoing, I know, between the leadership. I believe they're going on right now for the special session that we're supposed to have on Monday, the October special session, and so there is a chance it could still happen and come together in time for the October special session. We are less than a month away from the election at this point, and that always makes things a little more tense. So hopefully, I'm hopeful that won't happen, and we'll be able to come to agreement on it. But the way things have gone just over the last few months, I guess I'll believe it when I see it.
Right. Now, have people been talking about what might be some solutions to this problem?
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly, working with legislators, I try to work with legislators, from the opposite party whenever possible, and I've done that during my time, and I've socialized with them outside of the legislature, and obviously that is harder to do now that we're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, we have plexiglass between us right now at this point, so even just to be here, we have to put some have a literal barrier in place, even one made out of glass.
Right.
But so that taking away the opportunity to interact more and on friendlier terms with legislators of the opposite party has been a barrier, I think, to getting some things done. But we'll keep working at it. I think once presumably we're going to keep having special sessions even after the election. Maybe once the election is past us, whatever happens in it, then people will be a little more receptive to working together.
We'll kind of resettle people in different places, and the majorities might change.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that everyone across the country is trying to deal with, and you don't know till you try different things out what actually works for the group of people you're working with.
No, that's true.
Lots of changes.
Yep.
Now, maybe you could describe, first of all, because people hear the word special session, but how is it organized and what can be accomplished in that kind of setting?
Sure. Well, traditionally, we would only have special sessions if either there's some unfinished business from the regular session, then you might have a special session almost immediately after the regular session concludes. That's happened once or twice since I've been in the legislature. Or probably more commonly, there are special sessions if there's some sort of natural disaster and some sort of emergency aid is in order for a community in Minnesota. The special sessions this year have been very different. We've had 4 of them so far, and the 5th just got scheduled today for this Monday. The reason we're having them so frequently now, like I don't think I've ever had more than one in a year. Maybe one year we had 2, but certainly not 4. So the governor declared a peacetime emergency because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way the statute is written that allows the governor to declare a peacetime emergency, it says that if, it's fine if the legislature is in regular session, then it can just last through the duration, but the legislature has the ability to end the emergency. If the legislature is not in session, then the emergency can only last for 30 days, and at the end of the 30 days, the governor has to call the legislature into a special session to give the legislators the opportunity to overturn the emergency powers. So basically every month around the 11th, 12th, or 13th, somewhere in there, since our regular session ended in May, we've had a special session, and there's been a vote on whether or not to end the governor's emergency authority. Generally, the Senate has voted to end the authority, but the House has voted not to. So since both chambers didn't vote in favor of ending the emergency, it'll stay in place then for the remaining 30 days.
Yeah, so there's some conflict on whether that should happen or whether it should not, and that's interfering with the regular legislative process, right?
I mean, we have actually successfully passed some other legislation.
That's good, important.
Yeah, not in, I think it was the second special session we passed the package of police reform measures.
Right.
And there have been some other, less controversial bills that have bipartisan agreement from all 4 caucuses plus the governor, and we've passed a few of those as well. So we are able to pass other things as well during any of these special sessions. And actually, I don't even know if we're required to take a vote on the emergency authority, but we have done so each month that it's happened so far.
So some of the regular bills are moving their way along through during this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's correct. So as I mentioned, there were negotiations ongoing over the package of police reform measures, I think maybe between the first and second special session, and they were able to come to agreement, so then we voted on those at the second special session. And there have been other minor bills as well. And it is possible that there could be agreement on something like a bonding bill before our next special session in the October one. So.
Yeah, and that's been an important one for across the state, because there's a lot of areas that are needing the bonding, and they're just kind of waiting, to see what's going to happen.
Yep. No, that's very true. I mean, the emergency, there is definitely kind of a partisan hue to the discussion around the governor's emergency powers. But once we've had that discussion, then it is possible for us to vote on other things that are less controversial or have more bipartisan agreement.
No, that's good to hear, because people read headlines, not necessarily articles. So it's important to know that the legislature is accomplishing some of what they need and are maybe kind of stuck on the one issue of emergency powers.
Yeah, I guess we're stuck on it because that's the way the statute is written.
Yeah, you have to do it that way, right?
Yeah, so I would say we are still under an emergency. I think 49 or 50 states are right now, as well as the federal government. I mean, there've been 200,000 people, 210,000 people across the nation who've died from COVID-19. We've had 2,000 deaths in Minnesota, and just been averaging 1,000 new cases a day over the last week, I read. I feel like we're definitely not out of the woods yet.
Oh, definitely not over with it.
Yeah.
It's just differences of who gets the power to do what, I think, right?
Yeah.
But it is important for people to know that there is regular things happening right along the way and getting passed and getting taken care of.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can you think of any other ways that the coronavirus pandemic affects the legislative process? I mean, the emergency powers is a big one, but any other ways that you've noticed the effect on?
Well, just the mechanics. I mean, I mentioned that we had, mostly remote hearings of the full House, as well as completely remote committee hearings. those have been very different. I mean, in the past, all legislators have to be in the House would have to be in the House chamber, and there was no process by which a legislator could phone in or anything. But to the credit of the House audiovisual staff and IT staff and everything, we were able to get a system in place. The state constitution actually requires the legislature, it doesn't require us to meet in the Capitol building, but it does say we have to meet in the seat of government, which literally means in the city of St. Paul. So as long as a majority of us are in the city of St. Paul, it's more than likely any bill we pass meets the threshold set by the state constitution. So the last, I've been at my Capitol office, or my office at the state office building a couple times for a special session. I think that's where a lot of legislators go. One time during the regular session, I was just parked. I was in a parking lot in St. Paul outside of Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, where I went, because I knew I'd be able to get the Wi-Fi there and look at the bills on my laptop. But as the session started getting longer, I realized probably sitting out in my car wasn't going to last, or wasn't going to be a permanent solution. So I started going into my office. And
when it's a one-day session, it would be difficult to gather everybody together in the legislative building, because you have to spread them out all over, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's no way really in the House chamber to maintain social distancing. So, if we do want to be there for the special session, I think it's possible to be, but we need to let, the speaker know in advance, and then the sergeant at arms sets up basically a seating chart, and there's nobody next to you. And so you're spread out on the House floor. I think I was there during one of those sessions when I had a bill up. This was maybe in April or May during the regular session, and it's just very strange to be conducting the regular business of the House with the chamber mostly empty.
Scattered people here and there.
And then you hear people calling in, so you hear them through the speakers and so forth. But they were able to figure it out. So. And then having committee hearings, done by Zoom, is another big change. Also, I've been chairing the Government Operations Committee this year, so having to, keep track of who wants to speak, and and the time limits of normally when we're meeting in person, I can let the committee run a little bit late and we can keep voting on it, but they only, They also need to be available to the public and broadcast.
Definitely.
But I think they only the House only has the capability to run 2 meetings by Zoom simultaneously. So the committee schedule gets stacked up, and you have to end exactly on time. If you run late, you're cutting into the next committee's time. So you have to be really efficient, and hopefully have members that won't try to throw sand in the gears and so forth. And I think we were able to, at least on the committee I chaired, we were able to do that most of the time.
So are there other ideas for how to handle the special sessions that you've been hearing people talk about? Or they're doing the best they can with what they've got?
Yeah, no, I think they've been doing pretty well from a technological standpoint. They're still broadcast and available to the public. Occasionally a member will be calling in and we'll have some sort of technical problem, or you'll hear noise in the background. I think in general, though, the public has become a lot more forgiving about things like that. You see somebody's cat in the background during a Zoom meeting or something, and it's just become kind of normal now during these pandemic times.
You've done it enough for a long enough time now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, some of the issues, and you alluded to the police reform one, which is certainly an important one that arose out of George Floyd's death and whipped across the world, I think, reawoke people on the issue of policing and discrimination. How has the Minnesota legislature been approaching this issue? Because you said you got some things passed. What are the things you're discussing and what got passed?
Sure. There's been a lot of discussions about this, and it has, that haven't always been super, super relevant. But in our case, the Public Safety Committee in the House, chaired by Representative Mariani of St. Paul, I know he worked with his Senate counterparts very hard, and we were able to get a bipartisan package passed, and it had a lot of. There's actually enough in there that I brought the list.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
I can read it if you want.
Oh,
but,
yeah, just to let people know what got talked about and what got passed.
Sure. So in the package, so this was in the July special session that we passed, and I supported it. So there was more effective training on mental health and crisis intervention to prevent the escalation of situations to the point of needing to use force. Mandatory training, including de-escalation strategies to ensure safer interactions between police officers and persons with autism. Tools for first responders to cope with their own trauma resulting from their employment, because the police officers themselves often see very difficult things and may be suffering from something like PTSD. There's data collection on the use of force, a ban on the use of chokeholds and neck restraints unless deadly force is permitted, a prohibition on law enforcement agencies providing warrior-style training, a requirement that officers intercede when another officer is using excessive force and report it to superiors. There's a change in the arbitration process to hold officers accountable. This is something I worked on, actually. We authorized cities and counties to offer incentives to encourage a person hired as an officer to be a resident of that jurisdiction.
Oh, yes.
The law related to that has changed quite a bit over the years. At one point, cities were able to pass requirements that police officers actually live in their jurisdiction. And I think, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw statistics like something like only 8 or 9% of the Minneapolis police force actually lives in Minneapolis. So at some point, I think in the late 90s or early 2000s, the legislature changed the law to preempt the ability of cities to do that. The committee I chair has jurisdiction over local government powers. So I was interested in getting, I was a city council member. I'm generally a supporter of local control. So I still think cities should have the ability to require police officers to live in their city if they want to. I mean, that's not going to be perfect for every city, but a small city, it may not be realistic. But a city like Minneapolis, I think it could help increase the buy-in of police officers. Just if they actually live in the community as well, it'll make them more interested in it. But unfortunately, the just repealing the preemption was not agreeable to the Senate, but we were able to get a provision passed that said cities can offer incentives to officers to live in the city. So it's a step in the right direction. I think that's one issue that potentially we might come back and revisit it in a future session as well. But then a lot
of the areas of concern that came out in the media were things that the legislature took some action on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, certainly the chokeholds, I think, is one that there was a lot of demand from the public for us to do something on that, and I'm glad we were able to do it. And there was bipartisan support for it, so which it was great to see.
And then one of the things that's come out in the media a lot, and I'll have you give your opinion on it. There's people that want to defund the police, and there are people that want to reform the police. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the difference between the two ways of looking at the situation.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's when I talked about this getting kind of lost in the rhetoric at times. I think that's an area where it is. I mean, I do not support eliminating the police. There are times when you need public safety officers to help preserve peace in the community. I don't know how much the rhetoric matched the reality of what was actually occurring. What the Minneapolis City Council was discussing when the discussion about defunding the police was happening. I mean, if they're talking about increasing funding for social service needs. And so that, if somebody is having a mental health crisis, if they're, maybe a police officer is not the best person to deal with that situation. Maybe there is somebody who's more trained in working with people with mental illness. Then, increasing funding for those sorts of things, I think, is definitely a good thing. I feel like that was an issue where the rhetoric was getting a little bit out of control. And actually, I should mention too, it was interesting. During one of our special sessions when we were debating when we were debating the governor's emergency authority, several members of the Republican caucus were talking about COVID and how they didn't think the mask mandate was worthwhile and issues like that. And then one of the Republican House members sent out we have a few different email distribution lists in the House. One is like all Democratic representatives, one is all Republican representatives, one is all representatives. He sent an email that he intended to send to all Republican representatives. Instead, he accidentally sent it to all Democratic representatives, and he said, "Hey guys, let's stop talking about COVID. We need to talk about public safety. That's the issue. We're stronger. That's the issue. The public, that polls better or something." I forget exactly what he said, but he sent it to the wrong people. But it was I think it kind of tipped the hand that, this is an issue that's just been politicized, I think.
Definitely.
So, because I don't think there's anybody out there who wants to eliminate police departments.
And I think it's that sort of is dying down now. Didn't you think? It's not as hot an issue as it was.
Maybe not. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I've seen some commercials on TV for different political candidates, and it does seem like they're still trying to use it as a political bludgeon.
Some candidates are, definitely.
Yeah, so, I think most people have, especially since we passed this package, like I said, it won't solve everything, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, and I think it will help improve community and police relations just because of some of the things we put in place. And and the legislators who worked on this, I know we're working closely with the Chiefs of Police Association and groups like that. So that they had a lot of input into this process as well. So and many of those law enforcement organizations supported it as well.
Are there more bills that are in the process of being worked on in regards to the police issue?
It's possible. I mean, like I said.
Or that you know of? Yeah,
I imagine once we go back into a regular session in 2021, there will be more discussion around this. I feel like since we were able to pass the police reform package in July, I feel like there probably won't be any major action for the rest of this year.
Until the next legislative session.
So let an election happen, see what the composition of the legislature looks like, and what people are still asking for at that point.
And so I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to update our audience out there on some of the things and what's happening in the legislature, because it's been definitely different, right? A new change for a new time. So we thank you very much for being with us and helping our audience to learn more about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you.
And if they have any questions and you're in Representative Freiberg's district, be sure to contact him with either through email, because that's the easiest, or phone. And we'll look for you to join us again next week. Bye.